Being alone can sometimes be more beneficial for your soul than any relationship. I understand this may sound extreme or even uncomfortable, especially if you were raised to believe that love is salvation, that loneliness equals failure, and that healing must come from another person. But Carl Jung understood that some wounds are healed only in silence. Certain strengths appear only when no one is watching, and some versions of you awaken only when you stop chasing company at any cost. In this video, you will understand why consciously living alone can become the key to your deepest transformation. And by the end, you will no longer be begging for connection. You will become it. So stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you how to turn your solitude into a source of power, even if it still hurts right now. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Here we discuss consciousness, transformation, and real psychology, the way life truly unfolds. No filters, no cliches. From an early age, we are shaped to believe that being alone is a sign of failure. A quiet, introspective child is often labeled as a problem. A single adult is seen as incomplete. Silence around us is quickly filled with distractions, noise, and constant voices, all so no one has to face what happens when the outside world becomes quiet. Carl Jung said that for a person to become whole, they must turn inward. Yet our culture has taught us the opposite. We have been conditioned to seek identity in the eyes of others, to build a persona, that social mask that pleases, adapts, and avoids rejection, as if it were our true self. Over time, we begin to confuse connection with dependency, and the more we reinforce this pattern, the more threatening it feels to be alone. But what truly hurts is not the present moment. The pain that appears in solitude comes from the past. Old emotional imprints, unresolved rejections, and misunderstood abandonments return when there is no one left to perform for. It is the wounded ego that panics in emptiness, because the ego depends on responses, validation, and the presence of others to feel that it exists. The soul is not afraid of silence, but the ego is, and with reason. It was trained to survive through external acceptance. For the ego, being alone feels like danger. For the soul, it is a calling. Jung understood that there are moments when retreat is necessary, not as an escape, but as a rite of passage. When we are alone without distractions, what appears is not emptiness. It is the unconscious material that had been repressed. And this is where the real work begins. Being alone is uncomfortable because it forces us to feel, and feeling, when we are used to merely reacting, is deeply challenging. Yet in that discomfort, the process of individuation begins. When you stop running from silence and start listening to it, what emerges is not weakness, but clarity. You are not being punished for being alone. You are being invited to reconnect with yourself, perhaps for the first time, without intermediaries. When this reconnection begins, it does not arrive with euphoria. It arrives with silence, and often with a void that seems to promise nothing. Yet it is in that void that the soul starts to breathe again. Carl Jung called individuation the process of becoming who you truly are, not what others projected onto you, not what society expects, but what genuinely exists within you when all the masks fall away. And this journey does not begin in the middle of noise. It begins when you choose to withdraw, when instead of distracting yourself, you choose to look inward. Voluntary withdrawal is not avoidance. It is courage. It is you telling the unconscious, I am ready to see what I have been avoiding. It is the moment when the character steps aside for the real person, when the stage collapses and you begin to recognize the actor behind it all. Society trained us to associate stillness with loss and solitude with weakness. But from Jung's perspective, it is precisely in the pause that the self, the true center of the psyche, starts to reveal itself. And this process does not happen loudly. It is subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible at first, yet deeply transformative. When the external noise fades, you begin to hear your soul for the first time, and it does not shout. It whispers. It brings forward memories, intuitions, and sensations that were buried under haste, distractions, and the constant need to please. It is natural that, at this stage, a strange feeling arises, a discomfort of not knowing exactly who you are without routines, roles, and relationships. But that discomfort is proof that the right path has begun. The true self is not a ready-made concept. It reveals itself slowly when there is inner space for it to emerge. This is the journey. Not a straight line, but a deep descent. A process in which you do not add, but remove. Where you do not search outside, but return to something essential within. And that is only possible when you consciously step out of the world and into yourself. Solitude here stops being absence and becomes presence. Such an intense presence that, for the first time, you begin to notice what was always within you, but never had the space to surface. In this field of presence, something subtle yet profound begins to unfold. What once felt solid within you starts to crack. And this is not destruction, it is revelation. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. It is the role we perform, the kind one, the strong one, the charismatic one, the fun one, the efficient one. The persona is not false, but it is limited. It is built to fit in, to protect, and to belong. But there comes a moment when it no longer fits. And that moment almost always arrives in silence. Because when we are surrounded by people, tasks, and expectations, the persona functions like a shield. But when everything becomes quiet, when no one is watching, it loses its purpose. You begin to notice that many things you used to do, feel, or say were automatic responses, emotional habits, learned reactions, performances designed for acceptance. And when that theater collapses, it can be frightening, because what remains is simply you, raw, real, and unscripted. Yet this is precisely where the soul begins to appear. Jung said that individuation becomes possible only when the persona loosens its grip. And that does not happen through force. It unfolds gradually when you stop feeding the character and start sustaining the self. It can feel unsettling. You may feel as if the ground is shifting, as if you no longer know who you are. But this is not confusion. It is a new beginning. You are finally disconnecting from the version you were trained to be and creating space to discover who you truly are. At this stage, it is normal for sadness, anger, and even fear to rise to the surface. The persona existed for so long that it felt like your true identity, and when it begins to dissolve, old repressed emotions rise with it. But this is not a setback. It is cleansing. It is the unconscious being released. Solitude now is no longer just an external condition. It becomes an internal tool, acting like a mirror that reveals, deconstructs, and purifies. You are not losing yourself. You are finally shedding your layers. And what remains, once the excess fades, is the beginning of something authentic, something that no longer needs an audience, something that only blossoms when you have the courage to stop running from yourself. Without the mask, what appears first is not lightness. It is the shadow. It feels dense, like opening a room that has been locked for years and watching the dust rise. Silence is no longer just empty space. It becomes a mirror, reflecting everything you have avoided feeling your entire life. In Jungian psychology, this repressed content is called the shadow. It includes everything you did not want to see in yourself: your pain, fears, impulses, traumas, and shame. Not because you are weak, but because you lacked the space or support to face them earlier. The shadow contains all that was excluded, denied, or judged as unacceptable. And when you maintain your retreat, it finally finds a way to emerge. Suddenly, old memories return. Emotions you believed were long gone reappear with intensity. A sadness without a clear name, an anger without a direct target, a fear that feels endless. Silence begins to feel loud. And this is where many people withdraw from the process. They return to distractions, shallow connections, and the comfort of autopilot, because the shadow hurts, and facing it requires real effort. It demands presence, humility, and patience. There is no glamour, no applause, but there is truth. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is exactly what is happening here. You are not regressing, you are clearing. And the pain of this process is not punishment, it is release. Yes, release. You will want to give up. You will question whether it is worth continuing. But it is important to understand that this stage is not the end. It is the middle. It is the turning point. It is the darkest hour before the dawn, the phase of the journey where everything in you urges you to go back. Yet your soul has already begun moving forward, and it no longer wants to repeat old cycles. This is the point where many lose their way, but it is also where some are renewed. Those who hold space for this confrontation pass through a gateway. Those who accept the shadow realize that behind it there was strength, awareness, and power. You are not being destroyed. You are being deprogrammed. And what is emerging, as chaotic as it may seem, is the raw material of your transformation. So the only question is whether you will abandon yourself again or continue moving forward despite the fear. But not everyone arrived at solitude by choice. Some were pushed into it, hurt, ignored, or left behind, and that changes everything. Choosing to be alone can be a path of strength. Being alone because of exclusion is first a place of pain. It is different to wake up and say, "I choose to be with myself," than to wake up and realize no one stayed, no one listened, and no one returned. Many people carry this loneliness disguised as independence. They learned to manage life alone because they were disappointed too many times. They built walls not because they loved silence, but because closeness felt painful. And this kind of distance does not free you. It hardens you. Carl Jung warned that a soul that becomes too isolated begins to collapse inward. When isolation turns into a survival strategy, life energy stops flowing. A person begins living in defense mode, and what appears as self-sufficiency is often a deep fear of trying again. The line between solitude and isolation is thin, yet it makes all the difference. In solitude, you rediscover yourself. In isolation, you protect yourself. One heals, the other hides. That is why it is essential to ask an honest question. Did I choose to be alone, or did I simply get used to the absence? Am I at peace or just numb? This reflection may be uncomfortable, but it marks the beginning of change. Only by recognizing this pain can you start breaking the automatic cycle. Pain that is ignored repeats itself. Pain that is unfelt becomes a pattern. And often the phrase, "I don't need anyone," hides a deeper feeling. No one chose me. You are not broken. You simply had to protect yourself. But perhaps now it is time for something new. Time to let silence become a choice again, not a punishment. Time to release the weight of abandonment and walk toward yourself with presence instead of armor. True solitude heals. Forced solitude exhausts you. Recognizing this difference is an act of self-care and may be the first real step toward living in peace with who you are. When the soul begins to feel safe, the body responds, because the body also learned to live on alert, bracing against rejection, criticism, and abandonment, tensing up just to survive the fear of not being accepted, of being forgotten, of being hurt again. For a long time, you may not even have realized how much you were living in survival mode, always expecting the worst, always trying to protect yourself from something invisible, always holding your breath, shoulders tight, chest tense. But as you create space for solitude, not as punishment, but as a place of reconnection, your nervous system starts to register a new message. You are safe. Carl Jung suggested that the unconscious is not only a dimension of the mind, it is also imprinted in the body. Every unprocessed emotion becomes tension. Every unresolved story appears as physical blockages, unexplained discomfort, or chronic fatigue. That is why true transformation does not occur only in the mind. It must be felt, processed, and embodied. And that is exactly what begins to happen here. You start breathing more deeply, sleeping more peacefully, and feeling less need to explain, defend, or anticipate. The body begins to settle into the present, and the present, for the first time, no longer feels like a threat. Shift. This change is not sudden. It is subtle yet deeply liberating. It is when you realize that you no longer have to remain on constant alert, that you can exist without needing to prove yourself, that you can feel without fearing your emotions will overwhelm you. This state is not disconnection. It is coherence. It is when your mind, body, and soul begin to operate in alignment, on the same frequency, one that does not require effort to exist, that does not depend on validation to feel worthy, and that does not wait for approval to breathe peacefully. Solitude stops being a struggle and becomes a familiar space, an inner ground of stability. And this place does not exclude the world. It simply no longer depends on it. You begin to notice both strength and softness, protection and presence. Being alone no longer means being exposed. It means being whole. And when the body senses this, it releases its tension. It lowers its guard. And for the first time in a long while, you can simply exist without pressure, urgency, or fear. Intuition. With the body calmer and the nervous system at rest, something begins to emerge in a quiet yet very real way. A silent perception, subtle that does not shout or impose itself. It feels like a whisper from within, a certainty you cannot easily explain but clearly feel. That is intuition. Intuition does not compete with the world or try to overcome the noise. It simply waits. It waits for you to create space, to stop chasing constant answers and explanations and external guarantees, and to begin trusting the wisdom that already exists within you, dormant yet alive. Carl Jung considered intuition one of the 4 fundamental functions of the psyche. For him, it was the capacity to perceive deep patterns and subtle truths without relying solely on logical reasoning, an intelligence that arises from the soul rather than the mind. And it fully manifests only when there is enough inner silence to hear it. In this state of presence with yourself, you begin to sense what is right before you understand why. You start perceiving paths before you see clear signs. And this is not magic. It is inner coherence. It is your psyche functioning in harmony, without noise or internal conflict. You begin to notice small signals, a discomfort you once ignored, a feeling that something no longer fits with who you are becoming, a gentle pull to change direction. Gradually, you begin to trust that feeling more, to follow less of what the world expects and more of what your soul indicates. This inner perception does not require proof or justification. When you are connected to yourself, doubt loses its dominance. In its place arises something rare, effortless confidence. It is not arrogance, it is knowing. A knowing that does not come from the ego, but from the self, the deepest and most honest part of your being, the part that always knew but never had space to speak. This is the true gift of conscious solitude. It does not only quiet the external world, it reveals an entirely new inner landscape, a world where answers are not chased but recognized, and where presence finally becomes direction. The future self. With intuition awakened, something profound begins to align within you. You no longer search for direction outside, because now it arises from within. Along with this presence, an image slowly takes shape. Your future self. This is not about idealizing a perfect version of yourself or forcing yourself to become someone new. It is more subtle than that. Little by little, you begin to feel the frequency of the person you are becoming, and instead of chasing that version, you start walking with it. In Jungian psychology, the self represents the guiding wholeness, the complete image of the soul in coherence. The future self is a symbolic expression of that journey, not a character to achieve, but an inner orientation, a living compass. You begin to realize that what you have been searching for outside is not something missing, but something already active within you, asking for space. And as you begin living more aligned with that inner direction, decisions become clearer, boundaries stronger, and relationships more meaningful. This future self does not demand effort. It invites listening. It does not judge what you have not yet become. It honors every step you have taken. And the closer you move to that presence, the more natural it becomes to say no to what no longer fits, and yes to what resonates with truth. It is as if you begin to inhabit this new inner space even before it fully materializes. You feel peace before achievement, freedom before external change. And this strengthens you, because now you have a place to act from, not merely something to pursue. This movement is quiet, yet it changes everything. What was once a goal becomes a frequency. What was once a dream becomes a state. And you stop waiting for the world to change in order to live peacefully. You live in peace, and the world begins to respond. This is the kind of presence that does not demand, does not beg, does not the self adapts. It leads, and through that, it transforms. You are no longer running from the past or only healing the present. You are finally becoming someone capable of holding what you once dreamed of. Up to this point, much of your journey has been about healing, quieting the noise, facing the pain, and sustaining transformation. But something shifts when you start living in alignment with that future self. You are no longer trying to fit in. Now you hold. You emanate. Gradually, your energy stops being reactive and becomes a steady presence. You stop reacting, stop adapting to your environment, expectations, and noise, and you begin to radiate a frequency that comes from within, a frequency that organizes everything around you. In analytical psychology, Jung described the regulating center of the psyche as the self. When you align with it, your energy becomes coherent. You are no longer ruled by lack, by the need for acceptance, or by the fear of rejection. Your emotional field grows more integrated, and the world senses it. People begin to treat you differently. Situations that used to repeat begin to disappear. Draining dynamics dissolve, not because you became someone else, but because you stopped sustaining the vibration that kept them alive. You no longer need to convince anyone or prove anything. Your presence communicates for you. It says, I listened to myself. I honored myself, and I will no longer abandon myself to fit into what does not serve me. This state is not arrogance. It is integrity. You do not impose, you remain grounded. You do not close off, but you also do not shrink just to please. And that position is deeply magnetic, because where there was once seeking, there is now a center. You start to notice that you attract experiences that reflect your new internal state, not as a reward, but as a natural consequence of who you have become. The external world begins to mirror your inner world, and that changes everything. That is the power of conscious solitude. It does not only change you internally, it rearranges the field around you. You realize in practice that you no longer need to chase belonging. When you are whole, life comes toward you. Now your presence does not beg, it radiates, and what it emits returns. When your energy stabilizes, love also changes its meaning. It stops being a place where you lose yourself and becomes a space where you share. Because now you are no longer craving someone to complete you. You are whole enough to love without losing your identity. Conscious solitude teaches this directly, because it shows you that you can exist fully even without a romantic bond, that peace does not depend on someone's presence, and that true love only grows when you are no longer trying to be rescued by it. Carl Jung noted that no healthy relationship can emerge from dependency. For a genuine meeting between souls, each person must first find their own center. Otherwise, what we call love becomes fusion, and fusion, over time, turns into a cage. You begin to clearly see the connections you once accepted out of fear, the compromises you made just to avoid being left, the silences you kept to maintain peace. All of that now feels misaligned, because when you are whole, your heart no longer tolerates what harms your essence. This does not mean becoming cold, distant, or unreachable. On the contrary, it means loving with more presence, more truth, and more awareness. Loving because you overflow, not because you lack. Loving by choice, not for rescue. In that state, you no longer need the other person to recognize you in order to know who you are. You do not reshape yourself to fit shallow affections. You offer yourself fully, and for that reason, you remain only where wholeness is reflected. This kind of love does not require control or beg for return, just it flows. And when it meets reciprocity, it creates something rare, a connection where two people walk side by side without one needing to shrink, so the other can exist. That is what solitude prepares you for. A heart capable of holding love without losing itself in it. And when, or if, that love arrives, it will not find incomplete halves waiting to be filled. It will find someone who already knows how to be whole, someone who chose to remain with themselves before choosing any other company. Active imagination. Now that you recognize the value of conscious solitude, a natural question may arise. How do I sustain this state in daily life? The answer is simple yet powerful: presence. And the best way to begin is by creating a space where you can reconnect with the version of yourself that already lives in peace. This exercise is a practice of active imagination, a central concept in Carl Jung's psychology. Unlike simple positive visualization, active imagination is a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It is a symbolic dialogue with the deeper parts of your psyche, and that is why it can create real changes in how you feel, decide, and live. The idea is to create an inner meeting with what Jung called the self, your wholeness, your wisdom, your direction. For this, you dedicate a few minutes to silence, but not just any silence, a silence with intention. Here is how the exercise works. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, and breathe deeply until you notice your mind beginning to slow down. Then, mentally repeat the phrase, "I am here." This simple affirmation is not an empty mantra. It is an anchor, a reminder that you have returned to yourself. Next, imagine freely, without forcing, a version of yourself that already lives in peace. This image may be vivid or just a sensation. What matters is that it represents your state of coherence, clarity, and alignment with what is true within you. Observe this version carefully. How does it move? How does it breathe? How does this version of you deal with life's challenges? What does it no longer carry? Then ask 2 questions internally. First, what did you release to get there? Second, what do I still need to see? Then simply listen. The answer may appear as a phrase, an image, a memory, or even a meaningful silence. Do not judge, just receive. At the end, thank this version internally and say with intention, "I see you and I walk toward you." This statement seals the encounter. It is not about creating a fantasy. It is about committing to the most conscious version of who you already are. This exercise may seem simple, but it works at a deep level. It trains your mind to access states of presence, redirects your attention inward, and over time strengthens your bond with what is most whole in you. It is a symbolic step, yes, but every true beginning starts with a symbolic gesture, a quiet movement that says, "I have come home." You are not empty. You are full of yourself, full of parts of you that were forgotten, suppressed, or silenced in the name of relationships that did not fully see you. Conscious solitude revealed that. It did not isolate you. It brought you back to yourself. For a long time, you believed you needed someone else to feel complete. You believed the pain of being alone meant failure. But now, perhaps you can see that this pain was only the beginning of the journey, the call, the starting point. Carl Jung stated that the most important encounters are the ones we have with ourselves, and perhaps this is the deepest one of all. The moment you stop running from yourself and start observing yourself with presence, not with judgment, but with genuine interest. What was born in this process was not coldness, it was strength. You did not become hard, you became whole. And now you carry a peace that no longer depends on anyone, a clarity that does not require approval, an energy that no longer bends to incoherent environments because it has learned to radiate its own truth. You are not isolating yourself from the world. You are choosing yourself. You are growing internal roots so that if love does arrive, and it can, it finds fertile soil rather than dry land waiting to be saved. This journey is not about rejecting relationships. It is about preparing the space so they are no longer a hiding place but a mirror, a reflection of your own state of wholeness. And now that you have reached this point, ask yourself, what changed in you during this journey? What did you discover about your solitude and about your own presence? If you stayed until the end, leave a comment below. My presence is enough. That phrase is not only a sign that you watched the entire video, it is a commitment to yourself. And if this content resonated with you, If it helped you see your solitude through a new perspective, consider supporting the channel by clicking the thanks button below. This support, beyond being a gesture of appreciation, helps me continue creating videos with depth, research, and care. With your help, this channel can reach further and connect with more people who need to hear this message, that being alone is often the most direct path back to yourself. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next video.